So here's Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, also warning about the possibility of a second term for the former president. Kelly told the New York Times, quote, "It would be chaotic. It simply would be chaotic because he'd continually be trying to exceed his authority, but the sycophants would go along with it. It would be a nonstop gunfight with the Congress and the courts." And so you can imagine, Eugene Robinson, a scenario where instead of General Kelly or General Mattis or any of the people who said they stayed in those jobs to provide guardrails because they worried about what was behind them, won't be there. And I say this only slightly kidding that Mr. Pillow would be the man in the Oval Office giving guidance and advice to Donald Trump.
Not kidding.
Yeah, don't laugh. It would be people like Mr. Pillow and Sidney Powell and the entire crazy lunatic fringe that gathered around Donald Trump, and that will enable this move toward fascism. I mean, this is textbook fascism, and it's outrageous. It's incredibly dangerous, not just to our system of democracy and our democratic values. It's just dangerous because he's talking about wanting to essentially fire the people in the federal bureaucracy who know how to run things, who make the country work, who keep our air clean and our water safe, and who keep us safe in the intelligence agencies and in the Defense Department and everywhere. He sees somebody who doesn't toe the line, who doesn't go along with every crazy anti-democratic idea he has. He wants the ability to fire that person and replace him or her with a lackey. That's what he wants. That's what he intends. We should believe him when he says it. And this is a grave danger to the country that we know.
And it's confronted with this possibility, Jen, that senior people in the Pentagon think that were Trump to return to office, there would be no guardrails. He'd be completely unfettered. He also, importantly, wouldn't have to face voters again. So there's no consequences. That they feel like this could be the American experiment itself would be in jeopardy. So with that as in mind, how realistic, you've obviously just come out of federal government not too long ago, how realistic is that he could enact about some of these? Are there any checks and balances that could get in his way? Could Congress play a role, assuming they're not all just Republicans bowing down to him? How does this work?
Well, I think it's important to remember that some of these agencies that are independent is by tradition, and presidents of Republican and Democratic presidents have respected that. Donald Trump has made no indication he's going to respect that. He did not in his first term. And when I speak with national security officials in the Pentagon or former officials, they will say a second term is far scarier than a first. Now, beyond his intention of, say, self-pardoning himself, should he need, which his legal team and his advisors seem to be even talking about privately. The other concern here is that he could use these regulatory agencies and outside agencies for his own personal benefit. Think about the FTC. Nobody talks about the FTC as something they care about on a daily basis, I bet. But this agency has an enormous amount of control over companies being regulated. He could decide that company's my political enemy. I'm going to hurt them. I want that company to benefit so I can financially benefit.
And by the way, Jen, that's exactly what Orban has done.
Yes.
What he does, he doesn't throw people that run businesses he's supposed to into jail. He begins government investigations. He fines them. He taxes them. He levies such a heavy burden on them that by the end, one of his allies will go, "Hey, listen, why don't you just let me buy you out?" You look around and suddenly Orban has no opponents in the press. Suddenly the press, it's he does it exactly the way you're talking about Trump doing it.
Yes, it feeds into the potential for corruption, because if you are a private sector company, aren't you going to try to get into the good side of Donald Trump, or somebody who can control which companies are regulated or which are not? So it feeds into that as well. And, to go back to your original question there, Jonathan, I mean, I think the challenge here is whether our system is set up for a second Trump term. I mean, the people who've been elected, you may disagree with them politically or their policies, but they have respected, for the most part, rule of law. And when agencies need to be independent, for good reason. That is not something that Trump, and not just Trump, though, also DeSantis and others running for president have indicated they want to do away with these checks and balances that have been a part of our government for hundreds of years.